This is the Other 22 Hours podcast.
Hey, and welcome to today's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Shafer-Haiss.
And I'm your host, Michaela Anne. And we are in the second year of this podcast. So excited and happy to still be here and happy that you are here with us.
Yeah, a couple things before we jump into the episode. Making this show is a labor of love, like a lot of really creative endeavors that we take on. And so with that, any bit of support goes a really long way. And there are really three ways you can do that. The easiest is to just subscribe or follow on whatever platform you listen on. That kind of lets the algorithm know that we're worth 45 minutes of your time. The second thing is to share your favorite episode with somebody that doesn't know about our show. Could be this episode or any of the 50 previous episodes. And the most direct way to support this show is to subscribe to our Patreon. We offer a bunch of cool things over there. It's a really cool community. It's a small but growing community. You can check that out at the link in our bio, and we'd appreciate any bit of support.
And one of the things that we pride ourselves on this podcast is that we're not music journalists. We are musicians ourselves. So we think of these as conversations rather than interviews, conversations that would happen if we were just hanging out around the dinner table, sharing the very honest reality of what it is to be an artist, building our careers around our art in 2024.
And as we all know really well, most of that is outside of our control. And so we like to focus these episodes on what is within our control. And that ends up being our mindsets, our routines, our creativity. And we distill that down to the question, what do you do to create sustainability in your life so that you can sustain your creativity? And today we sat down with Morgxn.
Morgxn was born and raised here in Nashville, but spent time in New York City and in LA in the Broadway musical world and then the pop music world. He has had songs on the top 10 Billboard charts. He's performed on Jimmy Kimmel. He's played at Lollapalooza, Bumbershoot. Billie Eilish has named songs of his as her personal inspiration. He's performed with Sara Bareilles. He has had huge highs as well as lows and disappointments in this career, which makes him all the richer to discuss this type of stuff.
Yeah, and Morgxn is just really open about sharing these experiences, these realities, his thoughts in progress. And we have just such an easy flowing conversation here. The general takeaway being there's plenty of room at the table for everybody. And the more open and the more real you are, the more quote unquote successful you can be, the more wholesome it can feel. And that's about the best way we could sum up this episode. So without further ado, here's our conversation with Morgxn.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, for being here, for agreeing to talk to us. We're really excited to dig in with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
You feel like such a perfect fit for this podcast because you already so publicly talk about a lot of the stuff that we like to talk about on the podcast, which is essentially like, let's talk about the real stuff going on to be an artist that is also trying to build a career and survive, and essentially the stuff that we don't put on social media, but you do put it on social media.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a thing go viral. First of all, I want to throw up every time I hear the word viral, post, social media, any of it, just putting that out there. But I had a post go viral that was like, it was something about, I post what I feel for better or for worse, you know? I got engaged last September. I didn't tell people until December because I was like living life, you know?
Yep.
And what I posted was true is I am experiencing the most joy in my life, period. And every time I come to this little box in my hands, I want to scream and cry and run away. And there's such a dissonance between like the life that I'm living. My beautiful partner says like, you know, it's hard. You make an album and you're so proud of it. And then every day you have to come against this algorithm, capital A, that's like, if I post something and it flops, is the whole record a fail? I don't believe it is. I believe that I made a record I'm so proud of. But it's very hard, I think, as an artist in the modern age where you're like, you've made something, you go to share it and you're like, okay, I guess it didn't get heard today and it feels like a failure. So I posted something that was like, there's such a dissonance between the life I'm living and the joy I feel and the trying to funnel it into this box. that post went viral. And then I sat in a meeting with my label where they're like, we should talk more about that. And I'm like, when you reached out, it's like, do you want to talk about that more? And I'm like, do people want me to talk about it more? Because the truth is, I'm seeing so much bubbling to the surface. James Blake is a great example in the last couple weeks of there is a disconnect between the system that's been created to help music find people and the musicians who are making it. And I am eternally hopeful and optimistic, but I find myself at a rub right now because I don't know exactly the way through it.
I don't know if anybody does. And I can't remember who said, I heard recently, it's like, oh, you had mentioned it, the tech guy that you've been talking to who's creating that new app. He's started a bunch of companies and now he's looking at starting an app to completely disrupt the music ecosystem and put the power back on the artists. And it's some kind of social media meets streaming meets monetization thing. But anyway, he was talking about like giving pushback. Streaming has been around for long enough now that we're starting to understand it. Social media is really like things we're starting to understand. And he's like, no, what you don't understand is that these companies are changing their algorithm all the time so that you can't understand it and so that it perfects itself. And you're always going to be reacting to what they're changing. And so nobody knows what's going on or what to do.
Yeah, another musician had said, like, why are you going to start this new app when we're just figuring out what the system is now? And he was like, that's not how this works. And if you think about it, it's like, well, right now, TikTok is the leading mode of music discovery. A few years ago, it was something else. And a few years before that, MySpace was where it happened. And that's not a thing. It changes so fast. But the thing that I think is interesting about talking about this stuff, because sometimes one of the pushbacks that I see is you guys are lucky as artists to live in today's world because so many years ago, you couldn't get music out there without getting a record deal. And so you guys should just be happy with what you have. But to me, we've democratized music by letting everybody access it. And that kind of feels like a justification behind some of the stuff of Spotify being like not doing payouts for anybody who doesn't have more than 1,000 or whatever. To me, it all just feels like more justification for exploitation of we're going to feed on this idea of you guys all want something. Well, we're giving you an avenue. Oh, but we're giving you this avenue that's going to make you feel like, even though it's designed to make it incredibly hard to even make a little bit, we're going to make it so that you feel like you're so lucky to be here and you're the only one that's actually struggling with how to make it work for you.
Yeah, I love that your podcast exists because I just saw another friend like post something similar the other day. And I think that it can be so easy to feel like you're isolated within this journey, even like, how do you make it? And some people making it more than others. Like, it's not a competition in terms of there's only room for 5 queer people at the table. Do you know what I mean? It's like, to your point, I get and understand and appreciate that, like, I couldn't be a raging queer person the way that I am and be as successful as I am in music literally 10 years ago. Like, a manager 10 years ago told me I'll never make it in music as an openly gay person in Nashville. And that is, not true,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that is thrilling. That is exciting. Zoom out, music is what, 110 years of an industry? Do you know what I mean? Compared to like coffee making or like whiskey, like the recorded music industry is nascent. It's ever evolving. My manager is much older than me. I hope he doesn't take offense to that, but he is older and was the head of Atlantic for a long time. And he was like, I don't know what age you are, but I'm not young. I'm not like old. I'm somewhere getting older in a modern time, to plug my own music. But he's like, you're not young enough where you're used to every change and you're up on everything, but you're also not old enough to know that literally everything that is will go away, like
Right.
You're saying, like, it was MySpace at one point, like, et cetera. Like, who knows what's happening with the algorithm and with TikTok, et cetera. It's ever evolving. To speak on the James Blake thing, because I don't know if I made somebody mad, but I was just like, I love James Blake. Like, he is one of the few posters I have on my wall, him and Wet Leg. I love them. But he changed my life when I heard his soulful voice with the like electronic pop textures. It really inspired the way that I went to make music. And I saw this platform that he shared And my question is a true question is it just another Patreon? No offense to Patreon, but is it a subscription model? But how do the producers get paid? And how do the songwriters get paid? And how do the musicians who are used to royalties based on when it gets used in a movie, et cetera? It's hard to fix capitalism with capitalism, period. So I have questions as to like what the way forward is, but I'm at least excited to see people much bigger than me talking about this is a systematic issue that can't be fixed by the same people that got us into this mess.
Yep, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes is, if you do what you've done, you're going to get what you have.
Will we?
Eventually, you need to just grab the steering wheel and jerk it really hard to the left and be like, let's see what happens. That's what Spotify did, if you look at it. Or dig deeper, Napster or LimeWire or whatever. It was like, here, all at once, take it. But social media is made for everybody. It's not a music-centric, art-centric ecosystem. So those numbers, even though it's really easy to internalize that as a reflection of your art and your music and all of that, they're your scorecard on how good you are at playing the algorithm. You could be posting anything. There are woodworkers and 16-year-old charcoal pencil sketch artists that have millions of followers.
Also, not even how good you are at it, the luck of it. And it isn't a place that really is like elevating originality or uniqueness or anything. Like, it's interesting to me, like we have a 2-year-old daughter, and now because of that, have started to use Instagram in a whole different way. Parent stuff and mom stuff, and like follow all these different mom influencers. And I'm like, oh, weird. There's all these trends that they all use the same like audio and do the same thing or the same sketch. It's not like it's really a platform that's like, let's all be our unique selves and celebrate that. It's let's jump on every bandwagon and hashtag to like find all of the sameness. It's really counter in some ways to what it is to really be an artistic person, of wanting to create something unique in yourself, if that's even possible in today's moment in history. It's really about like, how do you like blend in so you can be appealing to the masses rather than create your own little thing.
Yeah. I try to push back on anyone who has ever said to me like, oh my God, musicians are the best content creators. I'm like, I will jump. No, I'm not gonna say stuff like that. I am not a content creator. Like, I just don't create content. I create music. Getting to the point where I could even say that I was a musician, I have such imposter syndrome. To be able to say I'm an artist, to be able to say I'm a musician is years of therapy rolled into like a moment where it's hard for me to claim that I'm an artist when there are times I'm making money from other jobs. That used to be something that I was so embarrassed by. I think there's like a Maya Angelou quote where she's like talking about how like not everyone is the son of a rich person or whatever kind of thing. Like when I was living in New York, this is 2009, I needed a job and I had done the bartender thing already. So like already took that badge of honor. And I went and got my real estate license because my family does real estate and I needed a job. And like, that was what I did. And I felt so embarrassed because I, of course, wanted to be an artist, but like I had a job, you know? And I've come around to realize because of my finding other jobs along the way to help me keep going, is a part of the advice I would give anyone, is that it's not just what you do on the 2 hours where you're on stage or at soundcheck. Like a lot of your life needs to be, you need to have other jobs to help support the dream. And that used to feel very scary to say out loud. When I was working in real estate in New York, there was a guy who I showed an apartment to, and he is a musician, and he had actually won the Grammy for engineering Flight of the Conchords. I don't look like I'm a real estate agent. Maybe probably everyone was wearing suits and I just like, I can't do that. And he's like, what do you really like to do? And I was like, so scared to say, I make music, because I knew what he did. And I'm like there showing him an apartment. And he was like, I'd love to hear it. And he ended up mixing like the first few songs that I like had recorded professionally. And it never would have happened if I didn't have that day job. I'm not trying to advocate for day jobs, but I am trying to advocate for like, it is so much less interesting to me to be like, oh my God, I came out of nowhere and I've never done anything else. And oh my God, wow. You know, because that's just not true. And it's not inspiring either. I way more want to hear how you busted your butt and had other jobs, you know. I think I posted something recently about sitting in a room teaching voice and piano lessons when my song with Tiesto was like blasting at the EDM festival to 100,000 people or whatever. And I'm like teaching this voice lesson, and this moment is happening in music because, I don't know, that's real to me. I haven't found the way that like you can share those real things in social media and have like the social media connection or whatever. But I think I'm coming to a point where I don't, how am I going to say this gently and truthfully? I think I'm coming to a place where I am going to make music for the rest of my life, no matter what the system supports or encourages. There is, I'm sure you have questions and I'm just going to keep talking, but I have a lot to say on this topic. But I posted something recently about, I think it's time to transition out of the music industry. And I got a lot of messages about it, like, why? Like, you're doing so good. And I'm like, it's not necessarily for just me that is feeling this. It's just, how do we say we are doing music when the industry is like not having our backs? I see so many friends sharing this stuff, and it hurts to watch artist friends of mine struggle with this idea. And full disclosure, it was like, I just turned 37. The emotions are like very high. And I'm curious what it looks like to step away from the microphone. And when I shared it, I had a lot of great conversations with artist friends who were like, my producer, Marshall Altman, was like, if you're in the music industry and you're not thinking about quitting, are you even in the music industry? That one resonates, but the one that I think that resonates the most, that is really making me think about what the point of being an artist in 2024 is there's a very big difference between wanting to quit and having nothing left to say. That for me is like what is guiding me. I have so much to say. I'm exploring in my life in terms of this farm I'm making with my partner and what it means to be human. I have so much I want to say. The fact that I'm oscillating between like, is this something I need to walk away from or not, is actually proof that I'm doing it. You know, it's proof that I am an artist in 2024, that I am reckoning with these huge questions.
Well, I think there's also a couple different things in response to all that you just said. One, the whole thing about jobs, having other jobs, I think there's this weird shame around it that we think, oh, you're not really a musician or an artist unless you're making all your money off of it. And now there's such a growing disparity of like, oh, if you actually are making your money solely from your music, you're one of the lucky ones. It's really hard to do that in today's world. I'm constantly like, I want to know everybody's finances. Like, I'm like, what are your reports? And what are you like, where are you getting money from? How are you making money? And I think that's important to talk about because like you said, trying to separate that, I think comes from hearing more and more from people. Like we had Adia Victoria on here and she plays all the big festivals. She's had record deal with Atlantic. And she was just like, I keep a day job. It also helps me emotionally and mentally to have some separation. Like, I don't want the music industry to think that it is my everything. And I think that leads into also what you were saying of contemplating quitting or not. There's this idea that it's all or nothing. You're a person that makes music, or are you a machine in the music business that's constantly creating records and content, and your whole presence in the world is only about your music? I hear that. Even I was talking with a teenager the other day who was like talking about different artists, and she was like, they just like disappeared for a few years, like no music. They weren't posting anything. What were they doing? And I was like, probably living life.
Yeah.
And then they're back. But when you're like 17, I remember thinking that in my 20s of like, what have you been doing for 20 years if you're 40 years old and you haven't gotten to where you want to be? And I'm 37 and there's a lot of ways I haven't gotten to where I want to be, and a lot of ways that life is better than I could have dreamed. And I'm like, a lot of life has happened in my adulthood, a lot more than just making music.
What resonated with me with what you said was using what you have to say as a barometer for whether to step away. And there is a lot to be said about having an outside source of income separate from your art that allows you to truly say what you want to say in the most like real, authentic way. I've brought it up a few times on this podcast, but there's a book called Real Artists Don't Starve. Intriguing title. It's like a C+ book. But the best part in there is he brings up all these Renaissance painters like Michelangelo. Oh, he's a legendary artist. He worked on commission a lot of the time. And so he was getting paid to paint certain things. He also then had the freedom to paint what he wanted outside of that. But most artists throughout history have had a benefactor, whether it was like a king or, you know, some other monarch paying them to create art or whatever it was. And for some reason in modern times, there's this stigma about basically your day job being your benefactor. There is a freedom there when you have that outside income. But I hear you. There is such a stigma around claiming I have a day job, both like internally and externally. If you can imagine and fast forward, I would guess, I'm 38, so we're in the same stage. If you can fast forward to being 75 and sitting on your porch or whatever it is and looking back, I personally would love to be able to look back on this portfolio of art that I created. And it's not going to matter how I funded it, whether I funded it from like tours or a record label or what, or if I funded it from like pounding nails, if I was proud of the art that I made.
Amen.
A lot of what you talk about is the state of industry and changes in the pandemic, how it's all affected you personally, but that it's within this context of how it affects everybody. But I'm wondering how you've personally processed and grappled with all that has happened the past few years of a record deal and a hit record, things going great, and then the pandemic hit, label dropped you, feels like everything falls apart, taken away, and then you started putting out songs independently and went really well for you. And all of those lessons and that feeling of like this stuff out of my control in the world, in the industry has impacted me, but it's also impacting a lot of other people. But how do you personally come to terms with that? And has there been a grieving process and a regaining strength and confidence process? What does that look like for you in a vacuum of just yourself?
Interesting. I played an event a couple days ago and I was like, I don't want to trigger anyone, but let's just drop in to March of 2020, you know, and everyone's like, oh, you know, and it's like, it's not that interesting to talk about what I knew was going to happen that didn't happen because we all faced that. But I dropped us into that moment where March of 2020, and this is like banging the trash cans and the pots and pans because we're like separate, but we're connected. You know, there was like this moment that felt like we're all going through this, no matter the socioeconomic thing is naive of me to think, but it felt like we were disconnected, but also so one in that moment. And that was the moment that I was dropped from my record label. And it felt like that was the end of everything. All I knew how to reach people was the machine in which I was a part of. It sounds like made up press story, but like if it weren't for Billie Eilish tweeting about me, and she posted like a list of 5 songs that inspired Bad Guy, and one of them was my song. That happened the same day I was dropped. While I was experiencing this like very low, I was also getting this endorphin high. You know, again, imposter syndrome. I'm like, I made something that like inspired somebody that I think she's awesome, like have always thought she was awesome and has continued to blow me away. I think back to that moment because it was as if the veil had been lifted and it was like, okay, what do I want to share? And what was on my heart was, I wonder if anyone will hear this. And I wonder if I'll go broke trying to keep on. And that song, Wonder, I think it helped bridge the gap between what was the pre-pandemic feeling and this sort of entering into the pandemic. I will say that I put so much into Wonder. I just hunkered down as we all were, and it was just like Wonder. That song went viral at every platform, and because of that song independently, like I made more money from music than I had ever made before. It was again like the matrix had been lifted, and I could see that there was a different way to do music. I think the process of grief is an interesting one to talk about with the pandemic, because in 2015, I lost my dad, and it was like a deep, terrible grief. And I think that for anyone who's ever experienced like deep, terrible grief, the pandemic was like a reminder of what deep, terrible grief feels like, because you're grieving not necessarily a person, but you're grieving a life you thought would be. And for me, that happened. I grieved like a career and a life that I thought I was going to have. And I don't think that I would have been open to all of the changes that happened. It sounds like I'm saying it's a positive thing, but in a way, the pandemic was so hard that it was what gave me an opening to move back home, meet my partner, and embark on other journeys that who knows what happens with our farm, but like the grief and pain of the pandemic led me to a new path in a way. It's hard because while I'm saying like there's a difference between wanting to quit and having nothing left to say, and I'm saying I have so much to say, I still feel like I woke up today and I was like, maybe I should quit. And then I just looked at my bank account and there was some money from music. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, it's wild. The way that I don't know the linear path towards music anymore. But maybe that's the most powerful thing in the world, is to say, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to be honest about how it feels and hope that more people have conversations like this that might make other artists feel less alone as we navigate this complete unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's scientific studies on how the human brain likes predictability and comfort. And so in knowing, in a way, in essence, putting like the psychic blinders on, it keeps things predictable and the same. And so if you're able to wholeheartedly say, I don't know, that triggers your brain to open and look at other possibilities. And I think that's what happened for everybody during the pandemic, is all of a sudden everything that everybody knew came to a grinding halt. What happens now? And you find all of these people finding new pathways, new openings, because it's just sitting there and going, I don't know, and being open to something new.
I think people either went two ways in the pandemic. They either went to, I don't know, or they went to, I know so hard that they went crazy. You know, it's like all of the people that were just like, I know, I'm like, you just shattered your reality and I don't know that I'll ever see you again. But we don't have to talk about that more. But I had a song in the pandemic called Losing Myself. The content I made for it, I don't do content. I make things that feel good and aligned to whatever I'm trying to share. I jumped out of a plane for the first time. I went skydiving. And so that was like some of the video that I put with the song Losing Myself. It was so exhilarating jumping out of a plane. The guy, he was like, normally people are like really like calm on the ground. And then as they get higher, they get scared. He's like, you seemed a little like nervous when you were like on the ground. But he was like, as we ascended, you got calmer. And I think that's like a perfect metaphor for my life, because I felt my feet ground and remember thinking, it's weird to feel so grounded when I'm like 15,000 feet in the air, you know? And then you're just like, you're at this threshold and you just fall out the plane and there's no turning back. But the song Losing Myself, the idea was, in order to be lost, you have to know what found means. You know what I mean? Like, in order for lost to exist, that implies that found is something you know and know that you're not there. I love music. I love art. I love artists. I love people who think, people who feel and try to reflect what they see in the world. That's what art is to me. I wish the system supported more people. Of course, there's the statistic about how much independent art Spotify like paid out last year. And like, that's true. And full disclosure, I made more money from Spotify than any other platform as an independent artist. So like, that is a true statement. But I still think it's an unfair place for so many artists, and wish that would change, period.
Well, I think also what you were talking about of the not knowing, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing the path, and how frightening that can be. But at the same time, the freedom in that, thinking back on March 2020 of the things that didn't happen that you said you knew were going to happen, but didn't happen. It was a turning point for a lot of us to kind of learn that hard lesson of growing up. That is just the truth of life, of you don't know. And grieving the life that we thought we were going to have, the experiences we thought we were going to have, and yet having gratitude for the new path, the new life that you've built that you probably wouldn't have if all of those other things hadn't been lost. That's like such an in-between that at some point, I think everyone learns if they're open to it. That's a part of life, but it's such an critical thing to know and figure out how to accept, I think, especially if you are on a life path as an artist or in a career, any type of career, entrepreneurial stuff. I mean, I think it's for any life, because even if you have a stable job, anything can happen. But that kind of healthy detachment from what you expect to happen is one of the hardest things, I think, for me as someone who's a dreamer and then has expectations and so emotional and get crushed from not meeting those expectations, and music that happens all the time. What does that summon for you if you think about?
I have thoughts.
Okay.
I am not somebody who believes in the advice of like, it's better to lower your expectations and then be excited about what you get, etc. I don't live like that. I am a dreamer through and through. I have a friend who matched with somebody on a dating app and they're like, I think they're the one, or whatever. And I'm never going to shoot down excitement. You may get your heart broken and they may be absolutely crazy, but like, I would much rather walk into life with the excitement of what could be. And sure, I've been crushed by the reality of what it has been, but I would never take away the hope and the joy that one day could change your life. Your art could reach the masses and that dream happens. I actually have something written down here, and it's have the big dream, but don't let it blind you from all the tiny miracles happening all around you and inside of you. That's hard because my dream is so big, like the thing I want to do is so huge. And I've had to reframe it. At this event that I played, there was a lot of beauty influencers, actual beauty influencers. And I, again, feel like a fraud because I'm there because I made a song, Wonder, that really speaks to the idea of having a dream and going for it. But y'all are very good at content. It's a lot. Like, they go through a lot, like, trying to do it. And there was a lot of beauty influencers who are new mothers there. And actually, one of them had their 3-month-old with them at this event. I was grateful to the brand for, I'll just say the brand, they're not paying me to say it, but Philosophy Skincare. I was so impressed that the brand was allowing mothers with their children to come to this influencer event because it's just so hard to do the daycare with the going to the event. But in a way, I don't know motherhood. We don't plan on having kids. I can't speak exactly to it, but it's like that is a new chapter in some of these women's life where they're doing one thing and then they have this other job that comes into the job that they're doing. And it's inspiring seeing companies support that and brands support that and influencers who are sharing the journey, as you talked about. When I see artists sharing like what is real about their process in their life, I'm always in their DMs being like, please share more of that.
Yeah.
Like, please share you juggling all the things that you're doing in the journey of being an artist. I can't wait to stream your song, but I actually can't wait to see you carrying your baby to sound check and doing the thing. One of my former drummers, like, he brought his kid to a sound check recently and the son was like playing drums. And I was like, I know your drumming is great, but honestly, all I want to see is your son playing your drum kit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's two belief systems in it. There still are people out there. I just had a friend recently tell me that her manager prefers that she shows more of her rock star musician self on social media and not her woman human self. And I was like, oh, like going like, and I feel the way that you feel. Some people are like, if you're a musician, you need to fake it till you make it. Act like you're a rock star, like show all the hottest pictures and looking at your best and on stage and make sure it looks like there's tons of people there. And I'm like, that's just not my personality. And also, like you, it's not what I like as a fan. I like to see that stuff, but I also like to see realness. I like to see truth. I'm more attracted when people are like, this is what I went through to get here, not this is the exciting, great moment. So it's cool to hear and see. I do think there is a budding movement of people wanting that, maybe because we've swung so far to the other end with reality shows and social media where it's this like false sense of reality. Everyone's like doing a lot to make sure that they're in full makeup with their plastic surgery face and like to look better than we all do on our own. And now we're like, oh, it's weird. Why are we all so depressed? Because we were like trying to live up to these unreal expectations that cost so much time and resources and money to try and create for ourselves. I think there is a movement of people that are like, I want to feel what's real and I want to have real connection through sharing our realities.
Yeah. Dan Wilson, the songwriter, Closing Time, but also someone like you for Adele and lots of things. I remember sometime I read maybe a tweet of his, I don't remember, back when Twitter was a thing. He was like, I try to think of every post as I'm sending like a love letter to like somebody I know and somebody I don't know. Everything he shares is intended to be like a gift. It's hard to think of social media as a gift for somebody else. And I'm not a martyr. And I'm not perfect, but I really don't spend my time and energy being like, how is what I'm posting going to make people feel jealous that this is happening? It's just not interesting to me. But how can something I share be resonant for somebody? How can something I share be informational and helpful to somebody else? With Wonder and with Sara Bareilles singing on it, like that journey 12 years ago, when I wanted to get started and she had Love Song out, like I had sent her an email asking for advice and she responded with like paragraphs of advice. And to this day, it is the reason why when I get an email from somebody that's like, I have questions, doubts, anything, I'm like, let me give you some. Because it's not like, hey, can you get me into this session? But it's like college kid who's like, hey, I'm interviewing people for like doing music, can I talk to you? And then they're like surprised that I'm like, yeah, you know, because that part of the internet actually does make me feel hopeful and that I'm grateful the internet exists. I think that's where I turn my discomfort and dis-ease with the landscape of social media into something like, what is this tool helpful for? And I feel like there is ways for connection. We connected through the internet. I don't think we've met.
We've never met in person.
No.
Wow. I think we have quite a few mutual real life friends.
Quite a few. Like, we have to meet.
I know. I think we've been at the Capitol at the same time.
As you do.
Yeah.
Always something to sing about.
Yeah, in Tennessee for sure. I saw on your website the What is Vital project. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. The What is Vital project is like a decade-long project that was born out of wanting to find a way to create art and give back to communities. And it started as like school workshops, like in public schools in Los Angeles is actually where it began. But the What is Vital project itself, that it is right now, was actually born in the pandemic because there were so many people doing like GoFundMe and Venmo, like save this thing. And all of that is great and would never knock emergency funding. But sometimes the structure of that doesn't support longevity enough. So my brother, who is more finance-based, helped me and my friend Annie, who is creative theater management background, to have What is Vital project have fiscal sponsorship through Fractured Atlas, which allows for donations to come into What is Vital project that are tax deductible for the people donating. And then all of that money can be used 100% as grants to artists to make What is Vital to them across many different mediums. It allows for giving to happen in a tax deductible way, and then all of that money to be used towards artists, not to pay rent, because that's a specific thing that I wish I could help artists do anything, but the money has to be used for the creation of their art, whether that's like materials, rental space, instruments. We've had musicians, we've had choreographers, we've had visual artists, we've had just recently a photography project that we could help pay for like film and darkroom, whatever that process is. But that was born out of the pandemic, trying to find a way to give back in a way that could hopefully be something I can grow.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Talk about benefactors and creating the safety net to be able to make the art that's vital that you need to make.
Yeah. It's not the most money, and it's something that like it is hard to raise money as a nonprofit to then give the money away and figure out how to grow the nonprofit so that we can give more money away, basically. But like America is a messed up place. Other countries have these kinds of grants are built into the government. Canada, Australia, you can get money to record your album from the government because that's how the government works there. You know, I'm not saying that those places are perfect, but like there's way more small grant giving from the government in other countries. And the What is Vital project is truly like small grant to artists to make what is vital to them. And I hope that as my career grows, part of the big dream that I have, I can grow What is Vital project into giving away more money so that other artists can choose to do their art in a moment where they need to choose between doing their art and paying their rent.
That's incredible. And I just want to note to anybody listening that's interested in learning more about that, whether as a receiver or as a donator, we'll put a link in the show notes to this so you can definitely check that out.
Yeah, I think about that all the time. One, any amount of money is so helpful for anyone to receive. Sometimes I think we can think like, oh, I mean, what's $500? Well, that's mixing a song, or it goes really far for a lot of people who are still struggling to just pay their rent and then to have any little bit to help cover different expenses. And two, there's so much money out there. It is just very unequally distributed. And we think it's distributed based on who works the hardest to receive it. And that's just not how it works. That's not real. That's not actually capitalism. So I feel like continually finding ways to create this financial abundance to share.
Yeah, they don't make it easy for sure. And there are many artist friends of mine who, one of the projects that we worked on, we were one of many of the grants and things that they had applied for that helped to fund their project. Like we were not at all the sole grant of money to this project, but we were a part of a group of grants that they secured in order to do the art, which is, again, I wish it were easier in America, but yeah, they don't make it easy for you to find out how to do it. In Nashville, they're trying to get more grants to smaller artists. I mean, we're in the middle of that fight right now where it's like not all the money should be going to these like large organizations. It should be going to small grants, you know? I would love to see that trend continue.
Yeah, cool. Before we go, your other project is you're building a farm.
The
other part of the other, very easy industry to start working.
Yeah, very big dream. Luckily, I have a partner who, like, we are getting our hands dirty doing everything. We built a shower 2 days ago, he and I.
An outdoor shower?
This one is an indoor shower.
Oh, okay.
But
I was like, I'm coming over.
Eventually, we want to build another cabin and have an outdoor shower. Like, these are big dreams, but we're going to plant an orchard. It's going to be something that people can come to the orchard, also like market gardens and farmers market. Like that's going to be something that we explore. But right now it's just a beautiful project that the two of us are, as my song also says, young and in love in the mess that we made. We are just getting our hands dirty, and I'm learning a lot. He has way more skill than I do. He's actually like the one that does most of the work, and I'm the one who goes on interviews and podcasts and talks about it.
That's
important.
That's kind of our dynamic too.
Yeah. I was like, we have like Ring notifications or whatever, and like I think I was like talking to like Billboard or something, and I got a notification and I just looked at it, and he was like chopping down a tree and like carrying it like on his back, like, to go plant somewhere else or whatever. And I'm just like, I'm doing like an interview about this, and he's doing the work. Cool.
Yeah,
Collaboration.
we're in our recording studio that Aaron designed and built with his own hands with his dad, who is a contractor, but Aaron did the physical labor. And I'm always like, yeah, we built a studio. We built it.
I love, he's always like, we did this. And I'm just like, I love that. I want to encourage more of that always. But like, I do also want to acknowledge, I know that you did it.
There's a lot to be said for emotional support.
And ideation too. Like, hey, we need to do this.
We just talked about water lines today and he was like, that's a great idea. And I was like, see, I've got ideas, you know, like it's wild what you can do. I think a week or two ago, like we like fully did all the piping and plumbing for the laundry room, you know? And it's just like, wow, there's so much that goes into it. But like also his dad pours concrete, like big concrete projects. So Gabe grew up doing a lot of this stuff, but I'm blown away by anyone who can do building things. It's remarkable.
Yeah, there's something really satisfying about the work that's very tangible. You can see, you start in the morning and at the end of the day, you can look and be like, we did that. You can see, you can touch the difference. He
has a degree in religion and studio art and is by day a therapist. But there's so much to like studio art. There's so much to like art and design to the like building thing, you know? And there's also like no professional engineer is going to like love me for saying this, but sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, it's like Legos, you know what I mean? You're just like the pipes and you're just, oh my goodness, look, they're just making a pipe, you know? Of course, there's other stuff that goes into it, I know, but some days it's like we're just children who grew up and are engaged in making things.
Definitely.
And it's a great outlet too.
I feel like I could do a whole podcast just talking about this stuff. There are moments where I'm like cleaning the gutters and I'm like, I'm a pop star. What am I doing? You know? And then I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm a pop star and I clean gutters. You know what I mean? That's the quote.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was Vance Powell. Do you know him? The engineer. He owns Sputnik and has worked on everything from Chris Stapleton to Jack White stuff to a ton. I think he was telling the story about himself, and he was saying the first time he got the call that he had won a Grammy, he was on his back porch just like picking up tons of dog shit, you know? And he's like, this is what I'm doing.
I love it.
This is my life. So
I hope for a beautiful life of all of that.
Yeah, definitely.
There's such a theme I'm picking up on like everything that we've talked about and your viewpoint to me of like inviting people in, creating space, being welcoming, being open. And it's just so rejuvenating to me. I just want to note that and want to thank you again for taking time to be with us here today and to share your experience and all of this.
I loved getting to chat. I love what this podcast is about, and I can't wait to hang out with y'all.
Yeah, likewise.
All right,
well, Morgxn, have a great day.
Bye. Have a great day.
Hey, real quick before we wrap up today's episode, it takes a lot to produce even a small show like ours, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider taking a minute to check out our Patreon. There's a lot happening over there, all with the intent of growing our community and offering you more resources to navigate a career based on your art more sustainably. You can learn more at the link in the show notes below. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll catch you next time on the Other 22 Hours podcast.